I am honored to introduce the next session. It's the executive board of the largest Muslim youth-led nonprofit in America. Please help me welcome Asad Gilani, who's also my son, Marine Khatib, and Mateen Aminyar. These individuals are all seniors at Paramus High School, and they are at the forefront of social justice and advocacy. This past year, they've been recognized by Yahoo News, Asia Tribune, and have received numerous acknowledgments from the governor, senators, and congressmen across New Jersey. Additionally, they've authored a book which is selling on Amazon called Equal Opportunity. They have a podcast on Spotify, they run a blog, and they have a dedicated team of 50 volunteers in their organization. They're going to be participating in a panel discussion, which is going to be moderated by Mehtab Khan. Thank you.
Assalamu alaikum, everybody. How are you guys doing? Good? Woo! All right, well, thank you so much for joining us in this panel. Before we get started, I would love for all of our panelists here to tell us a little bit about themselves, introduce yourself, and also maybe give me a little bit of a insight into your role and about your organization and what you do.
Yeah, so to start off, my name is Asad, and I founded Muslim Students for Justice. And we three of us started the organization at the same time. And the reason behind starting the organization was to bridge the gap and bring equity to school districts locally originally. And then throughout operating the organization, we expanded to the state and the national level.
That's great.
My name is Mehreen. To kind of expand a little more on what he talked about, we work with a bunch of schools to pass policies and raise more awareness about Muslim injustices in the educational system. We'll probably get more into it as you ask questions, but that's kind of the general gist of it.
My name is Mateen, and they cover pretty much all the bases, but we try and help other schools, just like our school, Paramus High School, to provide equal opportunity for all cultures.
That's great. So I guess since we're here for Muslim Heritage Month, the first question I want to ask you all is, what does Muslim Heritage Month mean to you as a student?
Yeah, so I think for us, what Muslim Heritage Month means is it just gives that second level of awareness that, us at our organization and also all of our peers have always been wanting. Especially in holidays, we've seen a lot in other school districts, acknowledgments of other religions, whether it be having Christmas off or Jewish holidays off, and also different months like Black History Month. So I think in addition to us celebrating them, it's great that now all of New Jersey can celebrate us as well to kind of bridge the gap in that sense.
Yeah, that's great.
I think on top of that, it's also kind of evidence of all the hard work that so many people put in. I know there's a bunch of people like Shahnaz Auntie and everyone who kind of put a bunch of work and effort into making Muslim Heritage Month a thing around here, so.
I think it's a great opportunity to inform future generations of what we should yearn to achieve with the society and culture and what Muslim students can accomplish.
Great, thank you. So Aziz, I have my first question here for you. Can you tell me what was the original goal of equal opportunity and how you think your goal was executed? And what do you think student activists can learn from that?
Yeah, so when I started Equal Opportunity and started writing it, the initial goal was we were working at Muslim Students for Justice, our organization, but we were working at a very local level. We were helping schools school districts like Paramus, Fairlawn, New Milford, close areas. But students were writing in to us on direct messages from Michigan, Texas, all over, and we wanted to help them, but at that time we didn't have, the team and the group of people to expand that far. So in publishing Equal Opportunity, we kind of gave all different student activists from different areas across the country the guide and the tools to pass policy in ways that we couldn't be there for them. So they kind of build their own activist groups. Since then we've had readers of Equal Opportunity pass policies in their school districts, make their own organizations. So it was really just to help more people on a national scale rather than the local scale.
Yeah, it was really amazing. I mean, I haven't been in the public school system for a while, But when kind of going through your book, you've really created this blueprint for how students can really advocate for themselves to their student government and through their school boards. So it was really amazing to see how you all have created this, guide to get involved on this very like local level, because you always hear that you should get involved, but it's hard to know where to
Right.
start.
Yes.
That's awesome. Marine, so, us had mentioned a little bit about getting messages from all over the country. Can you tell me a little bit about how running the social media team for your organization, how you think social media can be utilized to help marginalized Muslim communities?
Well, we see with a bunch of different topics how social media can help push forward a message about certain things. I think the main part about running this social media account is how we can forward messages about stuff that we're doing or stuff that's going on around the world. And it's really helpful for other people who, don't really look into this sort of topic, especially we have followers that, aren't even Muslim and, they don't really pay attention to things that we look into or stuff that's going around the world. So I think it's important for us to kind of push information out there so they get an idea of certain things that they may not have initially thought about.
Yeah, that's great. I think even over the past couple of months, we can really see the power of social media and how we've been able to have alternate narratives that most people don't really get to hear. So it's really amazing to see how you're able to utilize that and leverage it. Mateen, I have a question for you. How do you feel is the best strategy for the Muslim community around Muslim community outreach? And from your experience in this Muslim Students for Justice, in regards to policy reform, blog posts, and news articles, all these different strategies that you've had, where have you found the best success? And can you tell us a little bit about that?
So we tried multiple different outlets to try and reach as much people as we can, but in my opinion, policy reform was the most effective because it made everyone aware of what was happening, and whether they liked it or not, they became informed of what Muslim students had to face. But I feel like any type of attempt to try and make people know what we have to face is good. Doesn't matter if it's policy reform, a social media post, maybe talking to your teachers, your students, maybe start a club. Any single step is better than none.
Yeah. Can you guys speak to a little bit about your experience in either, achieving some sense of policy reform or, your experience in creating this club? What was your journey in being able to make that type of difference?
Yeah, so when we started first doing our policy reform, we started locally. So we started in our own school district, and originally, really inspired and motivated for change, we just went with us three, and we went to have a sit down with the superintendent, the board president, and some other policymakers of our school district. And while that was, they were interested in it and they believed that our initiative was they said that they just didn't see a lot of Muslim students. It was us three, but the percentages were very low. So they didn't know if it was worth it to bring halal foods or to give people Eid off. It was such a small amount. So that's when we started expanding our team and bringing more people. And then in bringing more of these people and showing the power of numbers to board meetings, to events, to governmental fundraisers, I think through showing the power and numbers of Muslims as a community, it better uplifted the activism and it made people listen more, I think.
Yeah, I think that's one of the key things around organizing that can be such a challenge is that this is an issue that people care about. You're trying to advocate for this issue, or, like you said, like halal food or having Eid off. And I think that's one of the things about being a marginalized community. You don't really have the opportunity to have representation. So it's really amazing in how you were able to organize for that and get that recognition that there is a group of Muslim students here that would really appreciate being seen. So
Yes.
that's very much outlined in their book, which is great. So considering the diverse backgrounds within the Muslim community, right? You can tell. So when we think about Muslim representation in the media, it's a very specific portrayal of what it means to be a Muslim. But we all know, and we can see in this room, that being a Muslim means you come from a really diverse background. How have you been able to ensure that in your activism, you're being as inclusive as possible in representing the diverse experiences and challenges for Muslim students?
Well, it's hard to get every single side of the story, but what we try and do is talk to as many Muslim students as we can, as many Muslim communities, try and find different sides and try and make it so everyone feels represented. So even though there are some situations where it's hard to help others, we will try our best no matter what. And starting off with school, now we're trying to spread it to other schools, and when we talk to other communities, they give us more information, like, oh, at our school, they don't give prayer nights. Okay, now we're gonna try and help them get prayer time. Our school, we don't have halal foods. Okay, now we're gonna go and help them get halal food. So it's all trial and error, but the more we do it, the more problems we'll fix.
Great. And kind of picking back off this idea around representation, and I think we can see here, we have this wonderful display that, there's a lot of Muslim significance throughout history in different countries, but I learned a lot of new things just listening in. I don't think I really knew much of what was featured there, so for Maureen, I have a question for you. In terms of the educational content, what changes do you think need to be implemented into our school curriculum to foster a better understanding and appreciation of Muslim culture and history?
Well, I go to public school. I mean, we all do, so it's kind of varying when you talk about private schools, Islamic schools, but from my personal experience, I think it was around 7th grade when we went into religion and cultures and stuff, and I remember our teacher, she wasn't Muslim, but she was kind of talking about Islam and what it meant to pray every 5 times a day or fast and stuff like that. And I felt when I was listening to it, it was very broad. A lot of the stuff she was saying, I would look around and kids would kind of be like, what? What is she talking about? So I think what in terms of public school, something I really wish they could emphasize on is more detail, or even asking a Muslim student to talk about their own experiences, because based off of what I went through, and even in high school, I took a class that wasn't really offered everywhere. It was called Terrorism Today, and everyone was kind of expecting the general base of 9/11, this and that, but that teacher, I absolutely enjoyed his class, because one thing he went into was how terrorists aren't the basic stereotype that everybody was talking about and stuff. And we went into cases that about school shootings, people that were white and actually non-Muslim that were going into it. So I think kind of pushing that knowledge that Muslims aren't this certain niche group that everyone thinks it is. So I think that's pretty much it.
Yeah, that's amazing, because I mean, a lot of time with your general media narrative, right? It's a very particular interpretation of what it means to be Muslim. So being able to have a public school teacher that is able to broaden those and pretty much smash some of those misconceptions is really appreciated, because I remember also in 7th grade I had world history, in literally the one chapter or half chapter on I feel it was basically a paragraph, right, of what does it mean to be Muslim, and then I had the opportunity to tell my classmates about what Ramadan is, right, and it tends to just be, and it is nice that as a Muslim person you can advocate for that on your own. But it is very light when Muslims have been contributing to society for centuries. So it would be nice to have a little bit more of a detailed description of how we can contribute there. So Mateen, I have a question for you here. In your outreach work, have you collaborated with non-Muslim groups or organizations? And can you talk to me a little bit about the importance of allyship and what that really means? And I think if you want to take an opportunity to define allyship, that would also be great too.
Well, we're still kind of trying to talk with other non-Muslim groups and other organizations, but in our own organization, we have many non-Muslim students that help fight for Muslim rights, and not because they're our friends, but because they want equal justice, they want everyone to experience the same schooling. So I feel like in our future, we'll try and get other organizations and provide our own help to other organizations and other religions just so they can experience a better like schooling, a better community. But allyship is one of the most important things in running an organization because just one person is not enough. You need a whole community, which is what we got here, thankfully.
And what's nice, really building and fostering these ally relationships at this young age is that you really realize that, sometimes allyship is a little bit tokenized. It's like, I was here for you, so you have to be here for me. But recognizing that it's really about having the same fundamental values that are going to be shared throughout whatever the situation is. So to be able to, foster that at a young age is really nice, and I hope that's something that, you can really help define your worldview as you go into college and, all these other places that you're going to go. So that's pretty great. So, Asad, I have a question for you now. Can you discuss a particularly impactful government relationship or partnership you've cultivated in your advocacy work and how it has advanced the cause of Muslim rights?
Yeah, so a large one that we've worked with and a large politician that we worked with in great depth is Assemblywoman Shama Haider, who was
here.
one of the first Muslims inaugurated into the state legislature. And what we did specifically with her is, when we first started the organization, we went directly to her. We had met her at a fundraiser, and we were like, how do we pass X policy in the entire district or the entire state? And she gave the helpful advice at the beginning to not focus on the whole entire state and not try to focus on a whole thing at once, but instead go at a local approach, especially because boards of educations typically work as separate entities. They don't have a governing body. So that's when we started doing our local advocacy and going from Board of Education to Board of Education. And then one by one, we started to get, state recognitions, county recognitions, eventually federal recognitions, and we started building on it from there. But I think the good mentorship that she provided as a Muslim activist, herself being in the legislature, is starting small often cultivates larger impact.
Yeah, that's a great example because I remember listening to a podcast about Denmark, right? And they completely changed the laws around driving, and it's very safe to walk and bike there. And it was a community effort. Community from community all throughout Denmark, they were able to say, we want safer streets for our kids. So I'm sure you'll find a lot of success in the strategy that you have going for you.
Yes.
So Maureen, I have a question for you now. Running an organization at a young age, what challenges have you faced and how have you overcome them to effectively advocate for Muslim rights?
I think the main thing was like just being so young. Like I think when we started this, like I remember like telling like my own dad, I was like, yeah, like we're starting this like organization, I'm writing a book, can I interview you? He was just like, yeah, like throwing it around. And then like I remember when like he finally found out that like we were like publishing something and this was a whole nonprofit, he was like, why didn't you tell me you were doing this? I was like, I did, I told you. He was like, yeah, but you didn't tell me you'd be like this big, And I was like, well, I feel like a lot of people didn't really take us seriously until, we finally had like The Voice, like post on social media, have our own book launch, which I'm so thankful to, having such a big supporting group behind us because that's what made us so like well known regardless of our age and, how young we were in like 16 and high school, so.
Yeah. I mean, I've known Asad since he was born, so seeing him do this is so amazing. And yeah, honestly, I was a little surprised too. I was like, oh, wow, they're writing a book. And I was very impressed by it, reading it through. And honestly, it's something I wish I had when I was in student government in high school and in different organizations in college. So you guys are really, I can't imagine the resources my kid is going to have when he's going to school. So I'm very grateful for that. That you are really creating a sense of inclusion in public schools, which is really nice. I have another question for you, Asad. How do you balance the need for immediate action with the strategic planning required for this long-term systematic change that you're working towards?
Yeah, so I think how we kind of focus on the organization is that the main way that we prioritize different policies and what our next steps are going to be is that we meet every few weeks or every few months, and we see that this school has reached out to us to cultivate an Eid policy or this policy or that policy, and those governmental processes and processes that take direct policy making will often take a longer time. So we'll slowly start planning that out, bringing statistics together, making presentations, and then eventually showcase it to that particular Board of Education. But when there's a specific issue that comes across that's more immediate, like a bullying situation at a school that requires immediate news headlines or something or this and that, we'll often go either to larger organizations that have more press connects we have, directly start posting that stuff on social media, on podcasts, on awareness to immediate issues. Those are avenues that are easy to people right away, versus processes and law processes like policies, although they're more effective, they take longer time. So we'll take a longer time planning them, and anything immediate go directly to social media consumer.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I'm really thinking about even at the law school, right? I know at Seton Hall Law School there was like a very email sent out to a right, and that's at the law school, and a lot of people, out of college or maybe their third career, they can be all the way 50, 60 years old, experiencing this type of like harassment at a school. So to be able to have a strategy for it, build off of is really. So a few more questions to wrap up, and this is a question that I myself as I'm speaking, but to see three young, such bright on stage, speaking in front with all this, I would like to know what was the moment for you that you wanted to be involved in this type of advocacy, because you are still kids. You should be, right? You are adults that have a lot to balance. You should be having fun of fun all the time. You guys are about these really important issues that impact identities, and we all know that it is fantastic becoming politically engaged. So I'd be interested to know what aha moments in terms of, okay, I want to get involved in this. So let me know what it was, because I hear about that.
All right, for me, it was during season, I ran track, and the policy for sports was that if you miss practices, you get kicked. And that when I started talking, he was like, why don't you join track? He says, I've with the season, I can't join if I know I'm gonna get kicked off the team. And I thought to myself, like, why should that be the obstacle? The can't chase his passions. So I was like, okay, I gotta do something.
When my cousin ran track, maybe like now 20 years ago, fasted, I was passed out. It's great that you're advocating a more inclusive.
I think mine was different because I think at a young age, surrounded by people that were involved in like the Muslim community, doing things like, I would volunteer at for like Muslim prayer and like committee and stuff. So I think at a young age already, I was like, okay, this is nice. Like this is something I want, because I saw like the evidence in front of me, like we're together. Like that's like slogan of like everything, the whole like Eid committee and like working towards. And it was like nice because you're seeing all different backgrounds. You're seeing them come together at all because we're just Muslim. Like that's just what it was. And I think I'm thankful to have like community come from Assad and like doing this whole like organization, because like that was passion that I had inside for a long time, and then I had an opportunity to do something. Like it wasn't just like following like my dad's footstep, else's footstep. It was like my kind of way. So
Amazing. So that I know I'm laughing for you.
Yeah, so for me, when I kind of that I wanted to start changing the community was when realized, and though just in a class discussion, that every distinctive community or multiple that they're a part of, a religious community, a cultural community, and in my opinion, I felt that I knew Muslims below face injustice, but I did my part because I was a part of the community and I was a member of my community events, and I would do this. But then I started to realize the difference between being a part of serving community. If everyone served their community, the impact would only be far. That's when I started taking steps to catalyze change and then in people. So instead of being a community, which, you know, obviously we're all part of this community, you have the opportunity to serve your community. And I think that's when I saw the change.
Amazing. You know, the idea of this, you know, is a real fun part of Islam and activism and organizing. And so to be able to see you guys really implement those levels or those values in Islam that we don't really talk about as often as, you know, maybe just reading namaz or, you know, what people think it is. So it's really nice to see you guys really advocate for those values on a daily basis with work like this. So just to wrap up, I have one last question for you all, and I'll put you out of your misery on stage. So looking forward, what are some of the emerging issues or challenges that you foresee in the realm of Muslim rights, and how do you plan to address them through your respective platforms and activism?
Yeah, so I think for me, a large issue that people face is that the more global injustices that there are, the more national and local issues come out of that, especially in different media portrayals. So in the very beginning of our book, we talked about, and we interviewed someone from the New York Times who, you know, one person wrote an article on one mass shooting incident, and one person wrote an article on another mass shooting incident. And the vernacular within the difference in one community where it was, I believe it was a white school shooter, did this terroristic act, and it was like, the very start was that he was bullied at school, he was clearly had mental issues, whatever it may be, and then when it was the Muslim perpetrator, even though both of them were equally as disgusting of an act, that he was portrayed as the villainous one and stuff like that, when in reality they both should have been portrayed the same because it was equally horrific act for both of them. So I think media portrayals fall down into classrooms and curriculum, so especially in the ways that Muslim history often won't be taught, but Muslim American negative history will often be taught, whether it be 9/11 or issues which are important to learn about, but equally as important as the good side, because the issues that Muslims face is often a very small facet of the community. So I think curriculum reform, which is a lot harder to do because it stems at the state level, and making sure that we're portrayed properly is a very urgent issue, because in fixing the ways that children think, that's going to, you know, obviously catalyze change for the future, because children and students are the future.
Yeah, it's amazing that you bring up the idea of like narrative, because we can see it on a daily basis, especially with all the news that's happening. What is a narrative voice that's being portrayed? And even when you think it's the most like mainstream or comfortable source that you're used to, it's really impactful what you're absorbing, what other people are absorbing, what your peers are absorbing. Right. So to be able to make that distinction is really important, and I'm glad that that's a focus of yours, because that's one of the things about today, right? With the Jeopardy, learning about our Muslim history, learning about our advancements into society, and then also kind of paralleling that with the narrative. It's important to make it clear and understand where we really stand. So yes, thank you.
Absolutely.
Maureen?
I think I would talk more about like our athletics policy, because that's something that, like, especially when, you know, the idea came up, being excused from like gym and like sports and stuff during Ramadan was like this idea that wasn't really that common amongst schools, but passing halal foods and having a prayer time and having off for Eid, like that was just like common topic in so many like schools that were fighting for it. But I never really heard of like, you know, the athletics policy, and when that came up, like it was something that we kind of wanted to push out towards other schools because it was uncommon, you know. And I feel like it's such an important topic that, like, especially when Mateen like shared his experience for track, like this is a real thing. Like kids in school are like going through this. You talked about, you know, your cousin who literally passed out, and like it's dangerous, you know. And like if we want to like ensure like good health amongst like our students, Muslim students, everyone, then that's definitely something that we kind of need to push out more towards like what we want to fight for and stuff.
Great. And Mateen, last question to you, same one. What issues are you interested in really, focusing on through your activism for the Muslim community?
Well, I have a similar one as Assad. I think Islamic ignorance is the biggest problem in America. It's not like these students are purposely thinking, oh yeah, these guys are bad. It's the things that they're getting taught, the things that they're not getting taught. It's the information that these teachers, these communities are putting in their heads. So I think all around the country there should be more events for Islamic teachings, and more courses like Assad said, that will inform students of what's going on in today's world. And all in all, like I think if we fix that, it'll be a better place for everybody.
Yeah. Well, thank you all so much for your advocacy and work that you do. You're really creating space for other Muslim students like you. It's work I wish I had when I was going to school. So thank you so much for taking the time out to do that.
Yes,
Thank
Thank you.
Thank you, Mateen, Marine, and Asad.